Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are pushing further into our series on the French and Indian War, or, as many of you know it, the 7 Years' War.
That's right. And if you're just jumping in now, we really do suggest maybe hitting pause and going back to our earlier deep dives.
Absolutely. The context of what came before, especially the situation of Fort William Henry, is pretty crucial for understanding the sheer shock of what we're about to discuss.
Because today's topic, the Battle of Carillon in July of 1758, is one of the great head-scratchers of military history. It's a battle that, on paper, should never have been a battle at all.
It should have been a walkover, a foregone conclusion. And instead, it becomes this cautionary tale of incompetence and hubris.
It really is. I mean, if you just look at the numbers, there's no way the British should have lost. The outcome was so unexpected, it sent shockwaves from London all the way to the colonial assemblies.
So let's set that stage. Let's start with what you could call the unstoppable force.
Yeah.
We have to convey the scale of this British army under General James Abercrombie. It was unprecedented in North America.
Completely unprecedented. We're talking about a force of nearly 20,000 men. Just to put that into perspective for you, that's a larger population than most major colonial cities at the time, Boston, New York. This army was a moving metropolis.
And who made up this force? It wasn't just British regulars, was it?
No, not at all. You had the corps, about 6,000 professional British redcoats, the backbone of the army. But then you had this huge contingent of provincials, something like 9,000 men drawn from the colonies.
So Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York.
Exactly. They all sent their militias. It was a massive combined imperial effort. The logistics alone, just feeding and supplying that many men in the wilderness, is honestly a victory in itself.
Right. And what was the goal? Where's this massive engine of war pointed?
The objective was crystal clear. Capture Fort Carillon, the place we later come to know as Ticonderoga. It sits right at that critical choke point between Lake George and Lake Champlain.
The gateway to Canada.
The absolute gateway. If you take Carillon and then Fort St. Frederick or Crown Point a little further north, the path to Montreal is wide open. This was meant to be the knockout blow to New France.
Okay, so that's the image we need to hold in our minds.
Right.
20,000 men, the best of the British regulars, a huge colonial army, all moving with immense confidence. Now, let's look at the other side. Who's standing in their way?
Well, you have one of the best French commanders in the theater, the Marquis de Montcalm. But he's in a world of trouble.
What are his numbers?
It's almost laughably small in comparison. He has, in total, about 3,500 men, 3,526 to be precise.
So that's a disadvantage of what, nearly 6 to 1?
At least. And it gets worse. Of that number, he has regulars, colonial marines, but, and this is a critical detail, only 15 indigenous allies. 15.
Just 1 5. That's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, previous French victories we've discussed relied on hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 of their native allies for scouting and screening.
It tells you everything you need to know about how stretched the French were by 1758. Their alliances were fraying, their resources were thin, and to top it all off, Montcalm's tiny army was on the verge of starvation.
Starving.
Yes. The reports are clear. They had less than a week's worth of food. They were desperate, outnumbered, and they knew this behemoth was about to crash down on them.
So a 6 to 1 advantage, well-fed, well-supplied, against a starving, tiny garrison. This should have been over in a day.
It should have been, and yet it became one of the bloodiest, most humiliating British defeats of the entire war.
Yeah.
To understand why, we have to look at the advance itself.
Because the disaster really begins before the first shot of the main battle is even fired. It starts on the water.
It does, with this grand armada.
Let's paint that picture. This army isn't slogging through the woods. They're sailing down Lake George.
And it must have been an absolutely incredible sight. You have something like 900 of those big, flat-bottomed bateaux for supplies and men, plus another 135 whaleboats for faster troops.
Imagine seeing that from the shore. The entire lake, for miles, just filled with boats, redcoats, bluecoats, flags flying, the sun glinting off thousands of muskets.
One of the officers who was there wrote home and described it as a delightful prospect, and you can see why. It wasn't just an army. It was a projection of overwhelming imperial power. It was a statement.
And the confidence of that army wasn't really placed in the top commander, Abercrombie, was it? It was all focused on his second-in-command.
That's the key. The real leader, the man everyone from the lowest private to the highest colonel respected and trusted, was Brigadier General George Howe, the 3rd Viscount Howe.
Our sources call him the soul of the army. What was it about him that made him so indispensable?
Howie's count. Well, he was the perfect blend of an aristocratic officer and a pragmatic wilderness fighter. He understood that you couldn't just march in European formations through the forests of North America.
So he adapted.
Completely. He trained his men in light infantry tactics, in skirmishing. He had them cut their hair short, shorten their coats, brown their musket barrels to reduce glare. He even learned from and respected rangers like Robert Rogers. He was the tactical brain of the entire operation.
While Abercrombie was more of an administrator?
A very good administrator, but not a field commander. He was older, cautious. He was the guy who made sure the supplies arrived. Howe was the guy who knew what to do with them. Abercrombie depended on him utterly for any kind of aggressive tactical thinking.
Which is why what happens on July 6th is so devastating.
It's the turning point of the whole campaign, the moment everything goes wrong. As the army is making its landing, Howe is up at the front, leading from the front as always.
And he runs into a small French scouting party, a minor skirmish.
A tiny, chaotic little firefight in the woods. And in that first volley, a stray musket ball hits Lord Howe and he's killed instantly.
Just like that. The soul of the army is gone.
And the impact is immediate. It's like the entire army's brain just shut off. The source material is so stark on this. It says, with the death of Lord Howe, both the inertia and the intelligence of the British advance faltered.
The momentum just died.
Completely. The advance guard, which had been pushing forward aggressively, just stops. They get confused in the woods, they pull back, they spend the rest of the day, a whole crucial day, just disentangling itself from the wooded maze and returning to the landing spot.
A day that Montcalm desperately needed.
A day? And then some. Because now Abercrombie is in sole command in the field, and he does what cautious administrators do. He hesitates.
He's only a couple of hours' march from the fort, isn't he?
A 2-hour march.
Yeah.
And it takes him 2 full days to cover that distance. 2 days.
What is he doing for 2 days?
He stops. He builds an entrenched camp at a sawmill about 2 miles away from the fort. He's securing his supply lines, acting like a quartermaster, not a general trying to press an advantage.
You can just feel the energy draining out of the whole campaign.
You can read it in the diaries of the men who were there. One of the doctors with the provincials, Caleb Rea, wrote that since Lord Howe's death business seems a little stagnant, that's the word, while your enemy is working frantically to save his own skin.
A stagnant army of 20,000, paralyzed by the loss of one man, giving the enemy the gift of time.
The most precious gift imaginable. So while Abercrombie is dithering, Montcalm is facing the crisis of his career.
He knows this massive force is coming. He's just gotten word of Howe's death, which must have seemed like a miracle, but he's still horribly outnumbered.
And he makes a crucial calculation. He realizes he cannot defend Fort Carillon itself.
Why not? It's a stone fort.
It is, but it's not a Vauban-style fortress. It's vulnerable to artillery, especially from the heights nearby. Montcalm knows if Abercrombie settles in for a proper siege, brings up his big guns, it's over. It would be, as he feared, a Fort William Henry in reverse. He'd be the one forced to surrender.
So he can't stay in the fort? What's the alternative?
Audacity. His aide, Bougainville, wrote it down perfectly. Our situation is critical. Action and audacity are our sole resources. So Montcalm makes a massive gamble.
He moves his army outside the fort.
Exactly. He marches his 3,500 men to a ridge, a rise of land about half a mile in front of the fort, across the Ticonderoga promontory. He decides to make his stand there, to build a defense from scratch.
He's basically building a new, temporary fort out of earth and wood.
In just over 2 days, the French soldiers worked, as one source says, with such ardor. You have to imagine these men, already weak from hunger, are now working around the clock, felling trees, digging trenches.
And it wasn't just the soldiers, was it? The officers got involved.
That's a huge part of it. The French officers, who could sometimes be quite detached from their men, grabbed axes themselves. They went axe in hand, set the example. It was an all-hands-on-deck, desperate scramble for survival.
And the centerpiece of this frantic construction, the thing that will become infamous, is the Abatis.
The Abatis, yes. We need to really understand what this was. Because it's more than just a wall.
It's not just a pile of logs, right? It's an engineered obstacle.
Precisely. They cut down thousands of trees. But they don't just stack them, they lay them down with the tops facing the enemy, and they sharpen every single branch into a spike.
So it's like a primitive form of barbed wire, but made of entire trees.
A perfect analogy. A dense, tangled, impenetrable mesh of sharpened branches, interlaced so you can't just push one tree aside. It was as high as a man in places and stretched for 100 yards in front of their main earthen breastwork.
100-yard deep kill zone.
That's exactly what it was designed to be. It wasn't meant to stop bullets. It was meant to stop men, to break the momentum of an infantry charge, to trap them, hold them in place, and expose them to withering fire from the protected French line above.
An absolute death trap built out of desperation and wood in just 48 hours.
And on July 8th, Abercrombie and his massive army finally arrive and see this monstrous wooden hedge.
And this is the moment for the fatal mistake. Abercrombie has seen what Montcalm has built. He knows his men are tired. He has options.
He has all the options. He has engineers. He has overwhelming numbers. And most importantly, he has heavy siege cannons.
Artillery that could just obliterate that wooden defense.
Pulverize it. Turn it into splinters from a safe distance. This is standard 18th century military doctrine. You encounter a fixed defense, you bring up the guns, you don't charge it.
But he doesn't wait for the guns.
He doesn't wait. He gets a report from a young engineer, Matthew Clerk, who suggests the works are flimsy and can be taken by direct assault. And Abercrombie, perhaps out of impatience, perhaps out of arrogance, perhaps terrified of more delays, he agrees.
He decides to send his infantry straight at it.
It's a shocking decision, a complete failure of generalship. He was convinced that the raw discipline of his British regulars, their cold steel, could just punch right through what he saw as a temporary field fortification.
So what was the actual order given to the troops? March up that hill and... What?
The order was frankly suicidal. The troops were to advance in formation up the slope directly into the Abatis. And get this, they were ordered to advance with shorter arms.
What does that mean for you listening at home?
It means their muskets were on their shoulders. They were not to stop and fire. Their bayonets were fixed. The plan was to march grimly through the French fire, get to the breastwork, and then it would be a hand-to-hand fight.
They were ordered not to shoot back.
Essentially, yes, rely on speed and shock. But there could be no speed and no shock against the Abatis. A French officer who saw it unfold called the plan desperate and presumptuous. He couldn't believe they were actually going to try it.
And the result was carnage.
Absolute predictable carnage. The first wave of redcoats marches forward with perfect discipline, and they hit that tangle of wood, and the charge just dies.
They're stuck.
Completely stuck, pinned down, trying to hack their way through with swords and hatchets while the French, safe behind their earthworks, have a perfect static target.
The quote from one of the survivors is just chilling. He said the French had an abundance of time to mow us down like a field of corn.
It was a shooting gallery, and the attack was a mess from the start. It was ill-coordinated. Regiments went in piecemeal. There was no unified push. It was just one wave after another of brave men being fed into a meat grinder for 7 hours.
7 hours of this. And during all this chaos, this slaughter, where is the commanding general? Where is Abercrombie?
That's one of the most damning parts of the story. He wasn't at the front directing the attack. He arrived late, after it had already started, and then he walked over to some high ground near the river to observe.
Observe. He's not issuing new orders, not trying to change tactics when he sees it failing.
Nothing. For hours, there is a total vacuum of command. Another officer wrote that no general was heard of, no aide-de-camp seen, no instructions received. The colonels and captains were on their own, trying to execute an impossible order until their regiments were bled white.
It's just criminal negligence.
It is. And in that vacuum, you see these incredible acts of bravery that are also just utterly futile. Which brings us to the 42nd Highlanders.
The Black Watch.
The Black Watch. They were a Scottish regiment, famous for their ferocity, and they, more than anyone, tried to make Abercrombie's insane plan work.
What did they do?
They were relentless. They actually made it through the worst of the Abatis in a few places and reached the base of the French breastwork itself. But they couldn't get over it.
So they're trapped at the base of the wall.
Yes, and they're trying to hack at the logs with their broadswords, their claymores, trying to pull the wall down with their bare hands, all while the French are just firing down directly on top of them.
My God. The bravery is astonishing, but it's just hopeless.
Completely hopeless, and they paid an appalling price for it. The 42nd suffered over 50% casualties. More than 600 men from that one regiment were killed or wounded. It's a legendary moment of heroism, but it's born from the absolute worst kind of leadership.
So after 7 hours of this, with thousands of casualties, the attack finally sputters out. What's the final toll?
The British and Provincials suffered nearly 2,000 casualties. Killed, wounded, missing. Almost all of them were the professional British regulars who led the assaults.
And the French.
Montcalm's losses were less than 400. It's one of the most lopsided defensive victories you'll ever see. A stunning result.
But even after all that, Abercrombie still has a huge army. He still outnumbers Montcalm massively. He could pull back, regroup, and bring up the cannons the next day.
That's what a competent general would have done. But Abercrombie's nerve was completely shattered. The sight of the defeat, the piles of his dead regulars, it broke him.
He doesn't regroup. He retreats.
He panics. He orders a full disorganized retreat all the way back to the landing site. He abandons the field, the wounded, everything, and essentially flees from an army he still outnumbers by at least 5-1.
Montcalm must not have been able to believe his eyes.
He was probably as shocked by the retreat as he was by the victory. And the effect on the British Army's morale was catastrophic.
The soldiers must have lost all faith in their commander.
Oh, absolutely. The contempt for him was immediate and universal. And it's summed up in the nickname they gave him.
Mrs. Nabbycromby.
Mrs. Nabbycromby. It's so cutting, isn't it? It implies he's this fussy, ineffectual, grandmotherly figure who has no business leading an army. It's the ultimate soldier's insult, and it stuck to him for the rest of his life.
And the strategic irony here is just massive. Because 1758 was supposed to be Britain's great year, the annus mirabilis, and in some ways it was.
It was. At the very same time, another British general, Geoffrey Amherst, was conducting the siege of Louisbourg, and he was doing it by the book.
He used his artillery?
He brought up the guns, he conducted a professional siege, and he won a massive, crucial victory. Louisbourg was a textbook success. Carillon was this inexplicable, humiliating disaster happening at the exact same time.
A disaster that gave the French a huge morale boost and kept the war on that northern front going for another year.
It did. But, you know, maybe the most important consequence of this battle wasn't strategic. It was political. It was about the experience of the American provincial soldiers who were there.
The 9,000 colonists who fought alongside the Redcoats. What did they take away from this?
They saw the British Army up close. And for many of them, it was not an impressive sight. They saw the rigid, brutal discipline. But more than anything, they saw spectacular, high-level incompetence.
They watched Abercrombie send their comrades into a death trap for no reason.
Exactly. They saw this aristocratic general, so far removed from the reality on the ground, make a decision that led to a massacre. And they saw him panic and run. The sources say they couldn't help noticing the differences between themselves and their red-coated superiors.
So it planted a seed of doubt, a seed of contempt, maybe, for British military authority.
I think so. It demystified the redcoat. It showed the colonists that these professional soldiers and their highborn commanders weren't invincible. They could be arrogant, they could be foolish, and they could fail catastrophically.
It's a lesson they would remember about 15 years later, isn't it?
It's a powerful and a bitter lesson. This failure of British leadership was something the provincials took home with them, and it absolutely informed their view of imperial power going forward.
So the Battle of Carillon, a perfect storm of bad leadership, tactical arrogance, and the tragic loss of the one man, Lord Howe, who could have prevented it all.
And on the other side, a masterpiece of desperate, intelligent defense by Montcalm. It really is a classic underdog story, but with incredibly high stakes. It makes you wonder, what if Howe hadn't taken that one stray bullet? How different would the next 2 years of the war have been?
A fascinating thought. Well, as we leave the bloody ground of Ticonderoga, we need to remember that this wasn't the only front. While Abercrombie was failing, other British campaigns were succeeding.
That's right. Next time, we're going to shift our focus to those other critical victories of 1758. We'll look at the daring raid on Fort Frontenac and the slow, grinding, but ultimately successful advance on Fort Duquesne.
The campaign that finally secures the Ohio Valley for the British. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the disaster at Carillon. We hope it gives you a richer understanding of this pivotal and tragic moment in the war.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.